All right, so welcome Andre to a brand new blog post series that we're going to be doing with videos. Now, those of you who don't know Andre, he's recently signed on as an Ad Libertas advisor, and he's an old friend that goes way, way back. And we're going to talk to him today about what exactly are data scientists doing at app companies. We hear a lot about data science in our industry. It's a hot, sexy term, but what does it actually mean, and what are companies actually doing? So welcome, Andre. Thank you for joining us.
No, thank you, Adam. It's great to join you guys. It's great because we were once at the same time for a brief moment, both having startups. So I have like a lot of feelings about being in the trenches of startups and building a company and a product in data and mobile space.
Sure didn't seem like a brief moment. It seemed like a long time.
Well, yeah, it was a long time, but it was also a long time ago for me now. And yeah, it's great to participate now from a different perspective.
Well, let's a little bit before we jump into that, the different perspective. Why are we talking to you about data science, and kind of for the people that don't know you, who are you and what's your background?
Sure. Yeah, my background is that I was an academic for a long time. I was doing my PhD in machine learning, and that was way before data science was a term, and even the iPhone was a thing. But halfway down the track, I decided that it would be cool to be an entrepreneur for a while and see how it is to build a product and so forth. So I started out randomly, almost making iPhone games. I had two titles. We never got everything right at the same time for the game. Either we had the monetization right, or we had the user acquisition right, or we had the game right, for a matter of fact. However, we never got all three things together, which is a typical story in the game space. And then 2 years later, my company switched to building an analytics/game optimization service. And that's where I learned a lot more about data science in the applied world. Specifically, also how to sell data science and how to package data science into a product. And that went well. That's how I met Adam, also between the gaming and having a startup.
And what was a startup? What did you guys do?
So Gondola was game optimization as a service. So our goal was to find things that could be optimized by a computer that would not require humans, and they're often the traditional way was with a human. So an example of that is dynamic pricing. So how much do you pay for an IP in a game or an app? Right, most people have static numbers. You could technically sell for anything a sword in a game because it's virtual. There's no cost of producing swords in a game. So we were doing these optimizations of very quickly iterating through prices or numbers and finding the best number that works for the game or the user. The challenges with optimizations is in data science. This is like partially the issue with data science, is that you can have the right solution. It doesn't mean that you have the appetite from the customers for that kind of solution, right?
Time. You're doing data science 5-10 years ago. It's too early.
It was too early, definitely way too early. But it also is just something that people have to get used to, right? It's the same thing with like self-driving cars. Everyone likes the concept, but if you could go into a gas station and ask the gas station to rip out your steering wheel and install the self-driving mode to your Toyota Prius, most people would freak out because you have lost all controls of your car from 1 minute to the next. And that's kind of our service was. It was, hey, you have a game that's functioning manually right now. Do you mind if we just rip out one of the key components to your car and automate it for you?
Tough plan, right?
So the company eventually got acquired. It was by Tilting Point 2 years ago. They're a game publisher. So I got a sense of what it's like to be on the other side of the fence, making games and publishing games.
So indie service provider, big game publisher.
Exactly. And so that gave me a new appreciation for something I always overlooked, which is the data engineering and data platform side. When you own your own service or your own game, you don't see how interconnected data is for all the different people in a company. Only when you get into company that has a portfolio of apps, do you realize how integrated and how you need to integrate all the different data sources together. I always told people when we were interviewing, or when I interview people, an app has an average 30 different APIs or services that it uses daily. And the challenge in data is, how do you bring it all together?
And we'll get there in a minute, but what were you doing for Tilting Point?
So I was the head of data sciences.
Okay, so for the publisher, the game publisher, a large recognizable, you actually had data science. So you have some authority in the subject of what app developers are doing with data scientists.
Yeah, in many ways. I mean, it's like the data science is very misunderstood. It's probably the most misunderstood title, and it might even be a fashion.
Interesting.
It's hard to understand that. I don't know, because I did not aim my career to be a data scientist. I don't feel attached to the title in any way. So I suspect it will be a fashion that will go, become something and will disappear.
Well, let's put a stake in the ground of what is data science to you as you define it.
So data science is at the tip of a pyramid of things that you need to have in an organization. And it doesn't mean that it's in the tip because it's the most important one. It's just there's a structure. It's a corner of it. If at the very bottom you have data and you have analytics as a second layer, data science sits on top of that, meaning that it depends on everything below in order to operate. So if you think about what does it take to build a company in the app world or having an app, data science is probably one of the very last hires we do, because every other position is necessary before it. Like, you need an app, you need data, you need to ingest the data, you need to clean up the data. You probably need an analyst before even. You need someone to count the revenue before, so you need an accountant. Data science is very, very much at the end of the tail.
So how do you break those apart? So you said this in the past, but I thought it was super interesting. I'd like to bring it up. So data analyst, data engineering, data scientist. What is the difference between those roles?
Yeah, I mean, just to go back to the previous topic, maybe it's a different way of explaining, because the pyramid is a little abstract, is data science is also another vertical of revenue generation in a company. That's how I see it. Like, when you are ready for data science, it's saying, okay, we have the app, we have an app that monetizes. Great. Then that's a vertical, right, of a company, perhaps. The second one might be, oh, we added ads now. Ooh, okay, ad monetization is another vertical. You could, if the app is big enough, you can say, oh, we have subscription. There's a whole subscription team specialized in managing subscriptions for the users. That's another vertical. And you could even, if you're in the game space, have an IP vertical, which is oh, we go to Hollywood, we find great movies, and we put it into our game. That's a vertical. It makes money by the sheer fact that it's Walking Dead or a Star Trek game. You don't need to have the best game to make money from a Star Trek game. You just need the license. And then there's data science. That's what I would claim. Data science specializes in extracting value out of data that's sitting there in ways that other people by themselves couldn't. So you're depending on algorithms and methods from academia usually to find new things in that were just there, right? It's like finding gold in a haystack, which is why it's so difficult.
So data science is the process of finding answers out of data.
Yes.
And how does that relate to a data analyst, as you said?
So the difference, I think, in data science from other positions that are similar, like BI analyst or data analyst or any other analyst, is data science is the career path, and the purpose of a data scientist is to create methods that extract value from data. Now, you can find data scientists that are very happy simply, picking things off the shelf, using them and creating something out of it.
When you say things off the shelf,
the simplest example is image recognition is a data science problem, perhaps.
Yes.
Let's say that's one. A real data scientist is going to say, well, we're talking about an app that's about dogs. So let's not use an off-the-shelf method for finding dog faces in these photos because it's too like it's not the best solution. The best solution is if I write a new method that takes into account the hair, the fact that the dogs have a very specific kind of nose. It's not a human nose, it's a dog nose. They're different than cat noses. You don't want to, you want to probably filter the cats out of the pictures. And that's what a data scientist does. He goes deep into trying to deconstruct what are the features in the data and how to create a method from those features. Now, an analyst is really incentivized in getting answers today. So an analyst, his reward is like, can I figure this out today? So it might be something like, well, what's revenue is a great common one, right? What is the revenue of this app? And let's forecast it for the next 180 days. The quick answer, I don't care about the fact that there's seasonality. I don't really particularly care about the fact that there might be a competitor coming up in the market. Like I just need to have some vast exploration of data quickly. The cool thing, I think, in the world of apps is that these two titles are merging together. So analysts are becoming more data scientists in the sense that now you could ask like, hey, BI analyst, I really need to know how many dog users there are in my app versus users that have cats. Can you figure that out? And you can find algorithms from Amazon and from Google that will do that kind of exploration very quickly. It would never satisfy like the itch for a data scientist because they say, oh, that's so easy. It's just off the shelf.
I see.
And that's I think the difference.
So to break that down, analysts get answers today, and data scientists develop methodologies for highly specialized, difficult answers.
Exactly. The data scientist is really trying to come up with something new that's very specific. An example of this might be LTV. That's something every app and game does. You can create an LTV algorithm using off-the-shelf tools. It's not might not be the best, but it will do something. The alternative is to spend 6 to 12 months developing an algorithm for LTV that is very specific to the fact that you have a bicycle app, right? Which has very specific what kind of bike you have
time of year, all sorts of things.
But it depends on the bicycle though, because if it's a kid's bike, summers are peak.
Right?
If it's a long racing bike, might be like fall because 50-year-old men only really like to bicycle when it's comfortable.
Interesting. Okay.
There's all these things, and you have to combine it all together, right? What kind of tires are they using? Kind of like the running apps, right? Running apps are very specialized and with a lot of data science behind it. And
so
people add, what kind of
the data scientists will come up with a highly specific, specialized LTV model that applies to that app in that methodology for that reason. And it might be have a slightly or very different outcome, whereas the data analyst in that case would be, okay, we're just going to do a simple regression projection, for instance.
Yeah. And by the way, there's nothing that says analysts do not go, iterate. If you give enough time, an analyst becomes a data scientist very fluidly. If you say to a data analyst, hey, for the next 12 months, you just focus on LTV,
right?
I think the answers are almost the same. I think it's really about expectations sometimes.
Yeah, it's probably more analysis versus science would be, yes. Okay, so data engineer gets thrown out there a lot too. It's a title that's kind of, I've never heard of it until recently, but what is a data engineer?
Yeah, so the mistake that has happened in the last 10 years, like even when I wasn't a data scientist, that I didn't even use the term very often, is that the analysts in the app space and in games and data scientists in the game space and app space were hired to solve problems, right? It goes back to that tip of the pyramid that I discussed above. And people forgot that they're not self-sufficient fully, that no one in a company is self-sufficient, right? If you look at a game developer, you have game programmers that program the game, but you have graphic artists, right? You have effects people, you have a whole bunch of making videos for the trailers or the interstitials in the game. You can't expect the programmer to do all of those things. And the unfortunate thing is the data, it happened that way. So data scientists and analysts were very common. But now after 10 years of iPhones and so on, people have realized you actually need data engineers. Data engineers are a unique new development in the world of data, because it's people who are specialized in ingesting data from third parties, where the data is not trusted and not formatted. So it's a matter of how do you put rules and logic and correctness to data and assumptions in a space that has none. So it's really it's like the department that takes the world's input and makes it understandable for the internal company to understand it, right?
I see. So they're in charge of data quality in a lot of ways.
Quality is definitely one. Data governance is a term that gets thrown out all the time.
Data governance meaning like PII and making sure you affect the policies, GDPR. For
instance, it goes into data quality, data assurance. Like, is it there when you want it? What are the things that guarantees that you have for data? Like Apple revenue, you still have to put rules around that, even if it's Apple, right? Like, it doesn't come up, it's not in real time, the data. There's a 24-hour plus or minus.
Right, we see that a lot. We see a lot
0 to 12 hours.
Big data batching, you have to schedule it, you have to refetch it, you have to have delays, and you have to have dependencies. So the data engineer gets the data in, the analyst gets fast answers, and the data scientist develops methodologies for tough answers.
Right. I guess what we have not really, the only thing that's missing in this, if you lay it out, is a data platform or data architect role in this. So data engineers do more than just ingest. They also create, progressively more, interesting data out of it, right? Or they have to, the responsibility is to merge data together from different sources. Right. That also becomes their responsibility.
ETL, ELT.
Exactly. The reason that it becomes a data engineering role is because if you let an analyst or a data scientist do it, they will only have enough visibility to do for that very specific problem they're trying to solve today. So if they want revenue from Google and Apple in a spreadsheet, they will create date, Apple, Google, and that's it.
Right.
Which will be perfect for this one analysis. But if tomorrow someone says, yeah, Andre, we really need it by country as well as
start
date.
over.
Oh, yeah, no, right. new Python file or SQL, you just do it all over. And it's fine if you're a small company of 10 people. If you're 1,000 people, you just made a project that took a month, you now added another month to the project.
So we obviously are very interested in data platforms for obvious reasons. What is a data platform? How does it play in all of this?
So data platform is in my view at least, is it's a holistic understanding of data, right? It is about having enough visibility and collaborating with data engineers and data architects, and also down the road, analysts and data scientists and even product people, in what are the rules and what is the strategy for data. It can be anything from what things we want to ingest data from, what things do we want to give trust to in a way, and which things do we say we do not trust. We can simply not trust it. Because if you blur the line of what is trusted and not trusted, you end up with situations of multiple data sources. You end up with inconsistencies. And the classic inconsistency is just naming conventions. Do you call it UID or
codes,
user ID?
One thing we've seen a lot of is how the political affiliations of the organizations who define the country code schemas, you'll see that bleed through a bit on exactly how they standardize on country names. Are they using the UN? Are they using the ISO standard? Are they using old-fashioned names of countries that no longer exist? It's kind of funny.
No, it's fascinating, and it's always like a trivia for understanding how much time have you been in this space, because it's like NA, country or not. It's almost a game.
Anonymous proxy. I like that one.
Yeah, there you go. Or but even what is empty? What does empty mean?
Right.
Every service provider has its own definition, and the company needs its own definition. So that's what goes on in the data platform. And the idea of the platform is that it's productifying data.
So something that I have noticed when I talk to people, there's going to be people that watch this and they're going to nod with everything you're saying because they know it, they understand it. And there's going to be people that are kind of like, I don't understand what data they're talking about. Like when I talk to people about what we do as a company, they say, oh, I rely on my MMP. So AppsFlyer, Adjust, Kachava, like I get my data from there. Now, why would there be multiple data sources? What is the value and what kind of data are we talking about? Why do these all need to come together?
So everyone needs a specific kind of data to do their job. That's how I would say it. So when I was making games, me and my business partner, we were wearing multiple hats. And so for us, it was very easy to use a single data source, for instance, because we knew the tools, but also because we were so much together in like the work, the day-to-day work, we modified tools to adapt so that we could do everything from a single tool even, right?
Well,
And that happens a lot when you're small.
That's Excel, but
no, the tool, let's say, let's say Mixpanel, right, was an analytics tool that was very popular. Mixpanel can technically record any piece of data in your game or app. So when we had added IP to one of the games, it was very easy to incorporate that into it. And not only that, but we knew the value or we wanted to make accurate decisions about our games via Mixpanel and revenue. So we did not, we made sure that the revenue lined up exactly with Apple's to the closest, 5% difference. Now, as you expand a company, sometimes you can't do that. You can't be in sync. An example of that is 5 years ago, you definitely couldn't get ad revenue on a per user level, click level in your analytics because there was just not data that was available. You would have to get the analytics from a player from one source, and later you'd have to download or extrapolate the revenue per click from a different source.
Which is a total average and a total waste of time. Right.
Exactly. But then you can mirror that at the end, and then you come up with an answer about player value or for LTV. Right. Now that is where data science, data engineering, data architecture comes in. That process. How do you now we just talked about two data sources needing a whole team of people to merge it together correctly. But a game, that's now two positions. Like we talked about revenue, that's like a monetization role in many companies, and we talked about ad revenue as a different title in the company. Now, if you look at an average app, there's many other things going on. There's marketing, there's social marketing, there's user acquisition, right. There is mailing lists that you might have.
CRM.
There might be, CRM. There might be leaderboards or things that are, to encourage players to play the game. In a game situation, subscription is a different thing altogether. Then, you might realize, it's what happens a lot, is like, first, like it used to be iPhone. Oh, we should also launch the app in Android. That adds a whole bunch of new things that you have to consider. Then you might say, which is happening a lot now, the Mac is very similar to iOS. It would be a very small hop for us to take our, dog app, picture sharing app, to go into the Mac. But now all of a sudden, none of the tools we just spoke about work on the Mac. There is no, the push notification maybe works.
So it's a whole different set of tools.
No ad monetization. So you're going to have to do some other thing for ad monetization.
And the Huawei store. So if someone says, hey, just clone your Android app and put it on Huawei, it's a totally different revenue source. So what you're saying is as a company gets more sophisticated, releases more versions, releases more apps, they spawn up different data sets that need to be merged. And that's where it gets complicated.
It gets complicated because of that, or the other way that I thought, it's not by the app's growth, but by your company's growth. Like the day that you hire an ad monetization person, there will be needs from that person that cannot ever be really translated into the data tracking that you have.
You did not talk about what I think is one of the biggest consumers of data, and that is the product people. The product people trying to decide from the user's analytics and journey what to do to drive the application, users' retention and impact and engagement.
You're completely right. There's a whole world of that. I mean, A/B testing, I think, is one, right? You often end up with A/B testing as an afterthought, like, oh man, we really need to test something.
Mhm.
And having the right solution is kind of hard to duct tape into a game or an app. And to be fair, there's very few service providers out there that do that specifically, right? So that's a
Well,
great example.
but,
There you go.
but
But
without being too self-serving,
yeah,
you do when we talk, you always talk about the easy way, the intermediate way, and then like the advanced way of doing things. So
yeah.
I was thinking about if you were to give advice to your exact publisher, and they want to get more sophisticated about their data, they want to get more answers out of their data, they want to make their data more useful. What would you say is kind of those three camps? Like, what's the easiest way? Just like make it work, forget about it, move on. And then when you start getting more sophisticated, how do you do that? And then the penultimate A plus, what do those stories look like?
Yeah, no, there's two ways, and I think a lot has to do with like how ready do you want to be from day one, right? As well, like what I always joke about, like I'm from Brazil, so in Brazil we learned to play soccer without shoes and that like with a piece of rock on the dirt and on the street. That's how we learned soccer. If you go to the United States and you see how kids learn soccer, you know, they have a full set of gear at age 5. They have the Olympic, you know, authorized soccer ball. The goal is in pristine condition. Like you have a goal, right? Let's like start there. In Brazil, you just have to do little rocks, you know, and you kick to the rock, which is more than sufficient for kids. So it's kind of like that for this too. So keep that in mind. Going like, you know, with a limited budget and starting out and you're small, I think the less services you use, it's always better. And in the case for apps, it's super easy because Google is actually a very decent service, and you can probably, with the right knowledge and the right team, almost use it your whole life.
And that's
The
Firebase is the
Firebase, it has the A/B testing component, has the analytics component. You
right.
can hack your way out of, you know, a lot of things by having BigQuery and
Yeah.
Data Studio integrated.
Yep.
So you
Visualization.
get you really can go from, you know, lawnmower setup for analytics and data for an app all the way to kind of like a Prius, like a pretty decent Prius car, if you use a car analogy, with just a couple tricks. And you're in a Prius is electric, you're ahead of the curve, like it's pretty neat. It gets the job done. Now, the big step up from that, however, is data into using multiple service providers for this, right? We're using the best. That would be level 2, and I almost would say like you can skip to level 2 if you really feel ambitious. Unfortunately, if your app or game doesn't really monetize quite yet, you'll feel very expensive. But I mean, I would always say that tech generally is less expensive than humans. So take
True.
that into account. Like there's tools like Amplitude that do amazing analytics. There's
Yep.
tools that do great A/B testing for campaigns, for instance. They're more like they're expensive. Like if you're starting out and you ask for the price, or if you find yourself asking for the price as an element of decision making, you're probably not there. Go down to step 1, unless you're funded or something and you want to go big. That's like giving the 5-year-old the full set of gear.
Well, I mean, I think it's probably fair to think. I mean, I think Firebase has something like 90% penetration in all of apps. So it's
Yeah.
fair to think that everyone has experience with Firebase that's made it this far through the talk.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about the intermediate, it's what that's multiple data sources. That's trying to get different sources of information that Firebase may not include, or and what are some examples of data sources that aren't included in Firebase?
Well, Firebase and Amplitude, they're only as good as the user. That's usually the challenge in our space. The difference between them is not what data sources you get from these tools, but rather what new features can you get out of it to extract value. Because data is relatively cheap. What's hard is the knowledge that you get out of it. So, you know, as we said, like you have BigQuery and you have Data Studio from Google with Firebase.
Right.
So you're down now to SQL queries for the bulk of your work.
Well, one thing I will throw in there, and this is of course pretty self-serving, so take this with a grain of salt, but BigQuery makes it difficult to kind of pipe data in very well. So like if you have impression level data, even IAP from like a revenue cat, it's hard to get all that transformed in. You're going to end up being your own data engineer using Google Query or Google BigQuery as a platform, and then you have to do your own analysis or data science on top of it.
But Adam, you're hinting at level 3 almost, because that is level 3. If you find yourself with 2 different pieces of data and saying, oh, this is really hard to do with Firebase, and you would say the same thing with Amplitude. Actually, in Amplitude's case, you would say, I can't do it unless an engineer helps me.
Right, because there's an SDK, right?
That's where you're level 3. Level 3 is we're going to create new data sources based off of another service, or we'll build our own data service or services. Like, if you go to EA or Zynga, they all have their own analytics backends. And level 3 is we're going to roll your own final data sources. So if you really care about the, having user tracking plus ad revenue, you're in level 3.
Are you doing that for cost? Like, why wouldn't they use the best of breed for like Amplitude or something?
That's a great question. And that's kind of what excites me about working with you guys and even data platforms right now is doing it yourself is very expensive, error prone. It doesn't scale well.
Build versus buy, that whole, right.
There is that, but it's also, even in a portfolio company, if you solve this, ad revenue with, IAP revenue issue, there's all sorts of little edge cases you don't know about. There's all sorts of
the pain of exploration.
There's that exploration, and once you solve it, the cost of solving these problems are only as great as dividing it by the number of apps in your portfolio.
Right. So it's
so
what
an
you can
average
get a return.
studio,
right?
It's a terrible return on investment.
Which is why companies like Revenue Cat have come up, which is because so many different companies have solved the subscription challenge with the platforms, and then Revenue's come out with a great product that can just pipe that data back into their platform. It's like a no-brainer.
Yeah, I think the dream that I have, and what I really look forward to, is that level 3 will slowly be phased out into level 2, where it will be a connection of services all specialized in something really great that delivers really great final data or perfect data for end users to use. And you might have 3 or 4 of those vendors.
So it's like back in the day, and you've used this analogy in previous conversations. Back in the day, people had built their own Oracle database data warehouses, they call them back in the day. They had their DBAs, their data architects. But then Snowflake came along and said, hey, we've got the best of breed as like a plug and play. So people are starting to migrate as technology changes back to these service platforms that are better, faster, cheaper.
When I started making games, there was only EC2 instances on Amazon. That was the only AWS service.
Wow.
And S3. So what happened? I built my own analytics service using raw machines with Ubuntu, as an operating system. I had to think about the operating system choices. And then eventually they had SQL as a service, right? RDM, RDB. And then we, close down these instances, create RDB instances. Then, someone, as you said, Snowflake, forget, you don't need a database. We have Athena. Just put the files in S3 and it's done.
Athena gets expensive. We know that firsthand. Anyone who's going to Athena, talk to us first. It gets expensive and it's not very fast.
Everything. Yeah, data is super expensive, which is why you have to really know the questions you're trying to answer.
So we're coming near to the end of our time. Is there any kind of closing thoughts that you have for an organization who's kind of looking to get sophisticated, that is wanting to know more how to utilize their data efficiently? So
I think knowing the right questions is super important. And actually, most people know the right questions already, right? Like we just spoke about ad revenue, how that's interesting if you have ads, and then incorporating that with some other metric. And solving that problem, individually is probably easier. as you get bigger, you'll have more and more of these problems. And eventually that's where data platforms comes in. But I think what's really important not to get lost in all these problems, right? Like it's very common to see people say, I really need to A/B test things. But it skips all these other questions that are way more obvious that you probably already had, which is like, am I monetizing correctly? Well, how accurate is your monetization recording? Maybe we can figure all your problems just by looking at your revenue data. You don't need to go to this deep end yet.
So start small with the easy to answer questions.
Yeah, there's a lot that can be done. That's what I would say with very basic data.
Yeah.
And I think the limitations are even great.
Yeah.
And we'll work on that.
Cool. Well, Andre, thank you very much for your time. We'll do this again. If anyone has questions that they want Andre to answer, send them my way. I'll put my email somewhere along this this video, and we'll try to address them in future editions. So,
yeah,
Andre,
no, this was excellent, Adam. It was great to talk and chat about like these different divisions of data that exist, and really look forward to chatting more about what you guys are doing, and also just about the space, because it's really,
yeah, you mentioned
it's very
building
new.
an LTV curve. I want to talk about that. That's going to be, I think, a future one. We'll address that
Excellent.
down the road. All right, everyone. Thank you very much for joining.